Welcome back, dear viewers of Imam Hussein TV, on another episode of Morning Baraka. As you've just seen, the scenes in Karbala are now reaching towards the day of Ashura itself. And as you know, and if you don't know, Muharram in Karbala is a special occasion because the locals themselves, they commemorate Ashura in a very specific way. And that's every single day. And this is probably the same when it comes to the whole Shia population, when it comes to the 10 days, each night is commemorated to a specific character of the massacre of Karbala. For example, on night 6, the Iraqis will commemorate a certain character. On night 7 or night 8, for example, is the day of the Qasim, the son of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And so each day within Karbala is a specific commemoration, so something very different. So within the night of the 8th, and to commemorate Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan, you'll see procession after procession of young children or a youth being adorned with armor, as if to represent the Qasim who was actually on the battlefield, telling his uncle, I want to go and help the cause of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I want to help the cause of my father and yourself. And this is the message of Al-Qasim alayhi salam. And so what they do is they adorn these youths with armor and helmets, and it's a procession where they commemorate the son of Al-Qasim. Or on any other day, for example, it could be the nights of Ali al-Akbar, and that's another type of commemoration. So as you've seen from the scenes, Karbala becomes much more populated, many more visitors come to visit Karbala. So it's definitely reaching towards the day of Ashura in Karbala. So that's what you've just seen on your screens, and this part of the program, as always, is the verses of love, where we take a bit of a deep dive into the poetry and the recitation aspect of Ashura, connecting with Imam Hussein alayhi salam through tears and through emotions. And of course, I'm delighted to be with my guest once again, Nouri Sardar. Many thanks for joining us on the show. Assalamu alaikum. Nouri, we touched upon a very interesting subject last episode. And I wanted to delve deep into it. And for our viewers, we spoke about Revival, which is a track that you released last year, and essentially it was different to many other tracks about Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And something that you touched upon last week was it reflects what you write, reflects who you are at the time. And your initial days of writing poetry was very traditional. It was an adaptation of the Arabic style or the Iraqi style of lamentation, and so that's how you would write. So there was a phase in your life where you wanted to change it up a bit and really try and reach the non-Muslims. So you spoke about writing poetry about Grenfell Tower, and just for the viewers who don't know, Grenfell Tower is a building that caught fire in London. So
basically,
you know more about this than I do.
It's a council building. In America, they call it like projects, but it's a skyscraper, and it's in one of the richest boroughs in London. And basically, to make it look better to the rich, for the sake of the rich area, they put a plastic cladding all over the building. And what happened was there was a fire, and because of the cladding, the whole building caught fire when it should have been contained. And just veering off very quickly, the reason I was so affected by it is because I lived in a very similar building. I grew up in a very similar building, which also had cladding on it.
Oh wow! So
if that had happened in my building, we lived 20th floor, furthest from the exit. So if that happened in my building, there was no chance we would have made it out alive. So it really just, and the whole thing is just the whole. It's an example of the real face of austerity in the UK.
Exactly. So basically, there was an issue which you didn't feel comfortable with, and you wanted to voice your concern, your opinion. And you used poetry, your skills, your techniques, in order to deliver that message, right? So there was a phase in your life where it went a bit away from traditional, went into a new realm. Did you say? Was it like a new realm?
Yeah, it was
of delivery.
It was scary for me because you know the typical delivery of poetry that happens in the West is spoken word poetry, you know, and that's what I was trying to.
How different is that to the traditional, by the way?
I think it's the words traditional and modern are I think terms I disagree with, but the best way to compare it, spoken word poetry, it's very, it's it's closer, I would say. It's hard to kind of define. But I think if you look at the typical poetry about from the...
Could you give me an example?
So from the Iraqi and the Iranian perspective, everything is based on structure, right? There's a very significant structure to the poem.
Okay.
Whereas spoken word poetry is all about free flow. It's
Right.
about how it sounds, it's about wordplay.
Can you give me an example of that?
I can't give you an example of that. Okay. But I don't like to use this term, but I would say it's closer to rap than it is, to traditional poetry. Yeah. But it's not rap itself, obviously. It's about... It's
just the way it's delivered.
It's kind of the Western way of standing up, and in Iraq when they stand up and shout Hosat and stuff, it's the Western way of doing that. Okay. You stand up and you throw lines of poetry out.
Right. So we've reached Muharram, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to keep recapping from last episode. So we've now reached Muharram. You've spoken about some very modern topical issues in the West, but you've also got a history of traditional, very traditional aspect of Karbala and Ashura. What happened? And why was revival created?
I was, like I said before, I just wanted to write something about Imam Hussein that reminded people, to look deep into why they're commemorating Imam Hussein and what kind of a person it makes them. So what I touched upon in that was like, if you're going to remember Imam Hussein, make sure that in your life, you stand up for social justice. When you see someone oppressed, when you see someone being bullied, when you see someone suffering domestic violence, even on very simplistic terms, with your prayers, make sure you don't steal money. It was basically like, it was quite simplistic in the fact that I was just saying, like, if you love Imam Hussein, don't do this. If you love Imam Hussein, don't do that, but in a more of a poetic way. And it's funny because, like, at the time, I remember I was telling you that I was scared about what the reaction would be to release my first spoken piece about the Muslim ban. When I was releasing this, I was completely, like, terrified.
Really?
I had no idea.
Why?
Because I had never done anything like it, especially when it comes to Imam Hussein.
Yeah.
There was a use of very light music in it, which I wasn't sure how people were going to react to either, to be frank.
I know all about that.
Yeah, you know about that. And also, it's the first, you're stepping into unknown territory. And the thing is, I wasn't completely, and I'm still not comfortable with it either. Because
you seem like it's very natural to you. Do you think it's not much of a difference? I'll tell you why. Because from a recitation point of view, there's a massive difference in how you project your voice or how you manipulate the sound coming out of your vocal cords when it comes to East and West.
Yeah.
And there's a major difference. So I can sit and recite for you Eastern melodies from now until tomorrow, but when it comes to the West,
it's hard for you.
I don't know how to deliver it.
No, it's hard for me too.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the thing is,
but is it the same there?
Speaking critically, if I look at that, it's not a good spoken word poem. I'll be very frank with you. It's not. The flow is a bit, it doesn't really flow properly. If I was to write it again, I'll write it completely differently. Really? Even topically, look, it came from a place of uncertainty. It came from a place of, am I really taking on the lessons of Imam Hussein? And that's what I put into the poem. And that's why what I was putting out there was uncertainty. And that's why I was worried about how people would react. Alhamdulillah, I'm very blessed that, it seemed to impact people. There were people that came back and said, I'm rethinking my relationship with Imam Hussein, which is what I was going for. Which is why, to be honest, the only reason why I don't hate it so much, because when I look back at it, look, I was in a place in my life where I was trying not to be negative. I was trying to be, and I'm still trying to be very positive and not look at, the negative. But I felt the poem was quite negative in that saying, you're going to do this fine, but look at this. And it almost tells you to look at the glass. It almost shows you a glass that's half empty, but then by saying that you should look at the glass half full, if that makes any sense. Yeah. When I look back at it, I do have some regrets. I
was just about to ask, any regrets?
Yeah, those are my regrets. I mean, I think if I was to rewrite it again, I would be much more metaphorical. I think it was too specific. It spoke about things like, making sure that if you mourn Imam Hussein, you remember your prayer, which is very important. But I think it just felt a bit out of place in regards to what I was going for. I was looking to revive the relationship that we have with Imam Hussein. And
just to be devil's advocate here, but you're telling me that the purpose of that, forget the personal point of view of you. Where you are at the time and the negativity, you just wanted to release that. But you're telling me that you wanted to send a message to the West at large.
No.
So looking beyond Shiism.
So this is the point. It was something written toward our community.
So this is specifically our
at a time where I wanted to impact the wider community.
Right.
Do you understand? So and it was basically, if I was to translate that poem or what I was going for, and it sounds really, really messed up to say, but we were saying to the community, what you're doing, think about what you're doing, you're messing up, fix up. That's what the poem was trying to say. And that very message, just by me translating it, it sounds very uneasy. It's not very nice to say. And that's why I don't like it.
Right.
But thankfully, people looked at that and they said, you know what, I do need to rethink my relationship with Imam Hussein. I think that, again, like if I was to do it again, it would be from a very positive perspective. The flow would be completely different. And the topic would be quite different. But I'm glad that I did it. It's a learning curve. You know, sometimes you just need to put stuff out there just to see, you know, just to ask yourself if you could do it, and just to get that off your chest. I don't think I would do anything like it again. I would definitely tackle Imam Hussein through spoken word poetry for sure, but in terms of the topic and what I was going for, I would never do anything like that again.
So what's the next step now?
So the next step, inshallah, for these 10 days, we've worked on an album called The Karbala Narrative, with the whole idea of that it's going to be a mix of spoken word and some recitation here and there. But the whole idea is just to ask ourselves what the narrative of Karbala means in today's society, what it means to us today. It's a much more metaphorical look. It's what I should have done for revival, and it's just going to look at the narrative of Karbala from different perspectives. And basically, the whole theme of the album is what is the relevance of the narrative of Karbala.
What do you mean by narrative?
So the actual story. It's a story that's 1,000 years old. What relevance does it have today? What does it mean to me today? What does it mean to non-Muslims? What does it mean to, you know, us in our community? You know, and the whole idea is just to tackle that through different tracks, and that's what I'm going for.
If you can just put two or three ideas together, what would it mean?
So
when you say narrative, and you say what does the whole story of Karbala mean to us today?
So obviously it means a plethora of things, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm going for with this is to pick it up and say what we should learn from it is that we have to look at the social justice in our society and make sure we implement that and make sure we tackle social injustice.
So we're now talking about the society, not the community now, because you've already
done
exactly.
It's an outward-looking album. It's not anybody. Of course, there are some tracks as well that speak about our relationship with Imam Hussein, as are typical. But the general theme of the album is to ask what is the relevance of the narrative on the wider world.
Yeah. What topics have you got in mind? So
I
know there's different aspects. You've got, for example, the story of Hur, and that's the story of you know, someone apologizing to you, maybe accepting it, or repentance.
Thing is, that's very
changing.
I think that's very that's too specific. I'm going for very metaphorical. Obviously, at the time of recording this, I'm still in the process of writing and making it, so I won't be able to comment completely on it. And I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I just want to put it out there, and if people like it, they like it. If they don't, kind of thing. But at the same time, just generally the whole thing is looking at the injustice in our society in a very metaphorical way, not a specific way, not saying this happens, but just generally there is social injustice in our society, and we have to remember that the narrative of Karbala was there to teach us to fight that in any way that we can, and to teach us to revive ourselves. It is basically what revival should have been, and hopefully that should be out now, inshallah.
Well, look, moving on, I guess we will talk more about this in the next episodes, but English poetry has gone through a lot, hasn't it? It's gone through a lot. It's gone through a lot of changes over the years, from the quality of the writing to the structure to the outreach, to its significance within programs and communities. What's changed over the years from your side?
So I think, as we've been saying, it's evolved from. I think you look at English poetry; it's got such a wide array of let's call it cultures or different types of species. You know, you have poetry that's written for nohas. You have poetry that's written for a spoken word. You have poetry that's written to stand up in the mosque and recite. Looking at so it's very hard to say where it's been, but from my perspective of my journey, I remember when we started journeying to America and seeing all those people that are, you know, kind of copying us in terms of the way we recite and the way we write poetry. I think that was then. Now I think people are growing. I think the one criticism I always had, I was very flattered that people would kind of take my style and use it, but my style was good for me. I think it's very important for everyone to find what kind of style suits them, you know, how they enjoy writing, and use it. And I think now this happened.
The great thing, sorry, just to cut you, the great thing about English poetry within the within Shia world is that there's no set form of what's right and what's wrong.
Exactly. Yeah.
So to fill that void, what you've done is you've set a precedent in saying, look, when it comes to English poetry and it comes to standing up, not reciting it and giving spoken word poetry, I think everyone just goes, okay, I'm just going to do what Nouri does because that's what we know to be English poetry. Otherwise,
I think it's a great stepping stone. It's a great foundation. But what I'm seeing now is that people are you know, exploding and blossoming and doing poetry from all sorts of angles relating to Imam Hussein. I think that's just been amazing. It's been an amazing journey. It's going to continue to be an amazing journey. It's just amazing to see it grow and blossom.
Where do you see it in the next couple of years?
You can't predict these things, really, can you? I think for me now personally, I'm diversifying. I'm still writing no Hazolat Mayas and poetry that fits that kind of structure. I'm looking to do more spoken word, things that tackle non-Shia related subjects, things that are very dear to me, just various different topics, both in terms of social justice and, like, you know, general day-to-day issues that we face with, that we tackle, and then also I think social media is the new platform medium to share poetry. You know, you have all these Insta poets that share their poetry on social media. I think that's something I'm trying to dive into as well, just to include like art and stuff with couplets. I think that's very important to share poetry. And all you're doing really is just you're chasing the times, right? And then trying to, you've got this talent, you've got your talent, and we're just trying to find the best way with the time to push that talent out. I think that's what everyone should do.
It's gone the days, like, for example, albums and CDs and stuff like that. Or
CDs, physical CDs, yes. I think there's still space for albums. I think like on streaming services, iTunes and stuff like that. You know, and ultimately all we can do, all anyone can do that writes poetry, or any advice that I can give is just to try your best, just to you know, push out your art. I think I'm going to, one thing I've promised myself is I'm going to stop making such a big deal out of it. You know, I feel like, you know, before when we used to release an album, we used to have a trailer out, you know, like it's a movie or something. These days, I'm just putting something together, I'm putting it out there. People like it, they like it. They don't. You know, I'm putting it out there because it's something I want to speak about, you know. And that's the beauty of art, you know. It can fly, it can not fly, but ultimately, as long as it's true to you and true to who you are, that's what's most important.
Brilliant. Well, look, I mean, there's many more that we can speak about when it comes to the revolution of English poetry, where it's going to be in the next 5 or 6 years. But what significance do you feel like it's going to have on the community itself? Because we've seen a shift when it comes to 20 years ago up until now. Like, for example, we've always seen the usual structure of a commemoration program is Quran, speaker, and then the reciter. That's the usual. But now, with the added, you know, value of English poetry, it's now always it's an integral part of a program. So that's what we see now. Where do you see that sort of developing over the next couple of years? Do you even see it developing?
The thing is, I think poetry will always be a very integral part of our commemorations. You know, you look at our history. The message of Imam Hussein survived, I would say, through the commemoration and the service of our scholars. But in the commemoration, you look at poetry. So Imam Hussein ultimately survived through poetry, so through poetic storytelling, through Latmiya as well, and, you know, all of that. So it's always going to be a very integral part of our lifestyle and our culture. I mean, it's funny because if you think about your first memory of Imam Hussein, I think about my first memory. And any child that you ask, what was your first memory of Imam Hussein? They'll say, you know what, I remember a majlis, I remember a poem, I remember Latmiya, you know. And what's amazing for me and you is that, you know, when we were growing older and we think about our first memory of Imam Hussein, we think about people like Basim, and people think about, you know, other Pakistani reciters. But what's amazing is that now kids are growing up and thinking, you know what, my first memory of Majlis was Nouri reciting a poem. My first memory of Majlis was Ali reciting Latmiya, or a track that Ali did. And that's a massive, massive honor.
By the way, I wanted to allude to that as well, because do you feel like we're not catering for the masses within our community, especially when it comes to the next generation of teaching them the importance of the traditional aspect of Imam Hussein salam before we teach them the wider aspect of the society? Isn't that more important?
Thing is, like for me, again, like this is why I haven't diversed from still writing Latmiyas and Nohas.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not transforming into something else. I'm diversifying.
Yeah, but you're not releasing any tracks or albums.
No, okay. For example, the album that I'm doing now, I do want to put in like 1 or 2 Latmiya tracks, just because I feel like, you know, these still ultimately speak to people. Okay. You know, but I'm just trying to evolve it, just trying to push what I can. Yeah. And ultimately, even if I'm not there to do it, if you're not there to do it, there'll still be people coming forward to push forward English Latmiyas and stuff. So, yeah, and I think it will always be a part of our culture. 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, whatever language they're speaking, they'll do it.
They'll still be doing poetry. Die down. Yeah, it's never going to die down. I just feel like, you know, because you're more or less the front runner when it comes to English poetry, and alhamdulillah, people do copy your style, and I feel like if you don't do something that's going to be groundbreaking in the future, there needs to be someone else that steps up to the plate.
The thing is, if you're asking me what I see myself reverting to what I was doing originally in the next 5-10 years. You know, yeah. So ultimately, you know, we speak about diversifying, we speak about impacting the wider community, but the bread and butter of it, and this is very as an antithesis to everything I was saying. But exactly. The bread and butter of it, the thing that touches you the most, the thing that will always be the most important, is standing up in a majlis and reciting a few verses poetry about Imam Hussein. That's all that matters ultimately. Yeah. You know, because that's what's going to have the biggest impact on people. Yeah. And I think that will always be there. You know, again, like I said, whether me and you are not there, that's always going to. You know, it's always going to. Allah's going to push someone else up. You know, as you're aware, Allah pushes someone up, He pushes someone down. You know, and I'm sure He will ensure that and I'm sure that He will ensure that the message of Imam Hussein survives through poetry forever, inshallah.
Yeah, brilliant. Because like I really want to, like, because I get, for example, parents coming up to me and saying, oh, like, my child, you know, recently listened to this track, and when they name the track, I'm like, oh my God, that was like 5 years ago. And I feel really guilty because, and we'll allude to this as well when it comes to the next episodes, and essentially when it comes to our creative processes of doing poetry recitations, actually physically going out there and doing the tracks. It takes time, takes effort.
But it's a duty we have, right?
It's a duty we have. I feel like, oh my God, I need to release something quickly. And not, because I've been, you know, dilly-dallying with the modern aspect of it, because I told you, from my perspective, from a recitation perspective, it's very, very difficult to train your voice to sing in the Western melody. Yeah. So I've been sort of trying to get in between both, and really trying to identify what's good for me. Yeah. But even then, like, you know, you try to do something modern because you feel like you want to reach the wider community, but at the same time you feel like you're missing out on. So
I mean that's why I think the most important thing is to diversify rather than transform, right? You can be a Sami Yusuf, but also be a Basim at the same time. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. And I think, like, one mistake I made over the years was always thinking that, like, for example, I thought, you know, if I'm a poet, I can't be anything else. I can't chase my passions. I can't, for example, look into filmmaking. I can't look into documentary filmmaking. I can't look into producing. I can't be a senior editor of a magazine because I'm a poet. You know, but ultimately, you become stronger when you diversify, when you chase your passions. So I think that's very important.
Yeah. So look, I mean, we've covered everything when it comes to, of course, within 15 minutes you can't really cover the whole topic, but essentially the future of English recitations and where we see it in the next couple of years. And I think the main message for me is not to change everything, but just diversify a bit, just so that we can sort of
I mean, the thing is, like,
cover every aspect.
Don't let go of what you're good at, right, and gamble it for something else.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, exactly. I think it's always good to diversify and just keep your strengths and make new strength elsewhere.
Brilliant. Next time Nouri's on the show, we'll be speaking about creative processes and what this means to him, maybe even to myself as well. But Nouri, thank you so much for your time once again. After the break, you'll be seeing Dear Masuma once again with Zahra Kazmi and Masuma Jafar, and they're going to be speaking about repentance and specifically the character of Hur. Over to you, Zahra.